I'm a natural overthinker and can get pretty anxious, often worrying about things I shouldn't and feeling guilty for no reason. Now, it can be crippling, especially during social interactions. I'll catch myself worrying about what the other person is thinking about me in real time. Now, maybe it's made worse because I'm autistic, but I know a lot of people dealing with something similar. I've seen friends lose sleep before meeting up with someone only to have a bad interaction because they're exhausted from all that worry. Others spend days feeling stressed over one awkward moment that happened in an interaction. Now, I used to spiral like that too, stressing about an event, not sleeping, eating poorly, skipping exercise, which led to bad interactions that I then beat myself up for. Fortunately, that has changed. Now, people have described me as bouncy, funny, magnetic, but it's not by accident. It's not inauthentic, it's definitely authentic me, but it's on purpose. I feel a bit vulnerable sharing this, but I'm going to share what I do differently now and how, as a result, perhaps you can reduce your anxiety and show up at your best from someone who's been there. Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual. Now, nowadays, I try to see myself as a mental energy athlete. I cringe just to think about it, but it's come through a series of self-discoveries and all sorts of things that ultimately mean that I consciously think about how I will make sure that I show up at my best for the moments in my life that matter most. Now, those moments include speaking at events, meeting potential clients and potential partners, meeting existing clients, meeting with my team, doing strategic thinking, spending time with my family and friends, and any other activity that contributes towards my goals. That's pretty much most of the time. Now, what does at my best mean? Well, there's a few parts to it. I suppose one is sometimes described as the level of emotional vibration, which when I first learned about it was a bit too woo for me, but actually I've seen how it plays out. And so whilst I'm able to let go of some of the debunked science or whatever behind some of it, I am able to take hold of what I find really useful. And so the concept of emotional vibration, if you Google emotional vibration, there's sort of a nice diagram with color spectrum purple at the top and representing the highest level of emotional vibration and down. And essentially what it means is that you want to be in an emotional state that reflects more being at peace, feeling joy, showing love, tapping into reason, rather than being in an emotional state of desire, fear, apathy, and guilt. And the reason it sort of talks about this frequency, this resonance, is about when you're at that more positive emotional state, actually it's felt by others and they resonate with you or resonate towards you. Whereas if you're in a position of guilt and fear and apathy and desire, they feel that too, and it can repel people essentially. So as a result, when I'm talking about being at my best, I'm thinking of being up the higher end of that emotional vibration at that purple and the peace, joy, love. And actually I was introduced to that concept by Paul Avens, who was on episode 50 of this podcast. And he's a brilliant man with lots of great insights. So it's worth checking out that episode as well. Second thing around being at my best is feeling rested and not tired. Thirdly, feeling focused, not distracted. So, for example, if I'm engaging with someone, my phone is away and on silent. I'm not looking at that all the time. But also I'm not distracted by what else is going on in my life when I'm trying to be present in that moment. I also try and be happy and grateful for what I have rather than feeling like I want something else. I try and be calm and content, but also playful and funny, being kind to myself, living my values, focused on helping others, ultimately trying to be a nice person to be around and a happy person inside. Now, sometimes that can be hard to define. It's probably sometimes easier to look at the opposite. So an opposite would be if I am beating myself up about how I'm performing at an event or something, or I'm not being playful, instead getting a bit too serious. And so those would be examples where I'm then not showing up at my best. I'm not being my authentic self because I'm playful and I like to do that, be sometimes a bit silly. And so it shows, and it impacts how I connect with other people and who I connect with, and so on. So that's what being at my best means for me. And it's worth you thinking about what the best version of you looks like, because there's no point in you trying to be what you think other people might like. It's not authentic. And if you're successful with it, you'll hate yourself, leading to another spiral, right? And I've been there. I remember reading How to Win Friends and Influence People a long time ago when I was particularly struggling with connecting with people and so on. And I remember one of the things I learned was, yes, you need to be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise, which essentially means be positive to other people and appreciate other people and say praising things, compliments, etc. But also ask questions, ask lots of questions in discussions. And I found that really useful. Like, people loved talking to me when I did those things effectively. Problem was, I began to hate having those conversations and find other people really irritating, because I realized how little other people do it. I was watching and it's like, yeah, if I go full in on being this, this attractive conversationalist, I start to realize other people will happily never ask you a question and won't ever apply praise to others, and so on. And it feels like a very one-way experience and quite painful. And so it took a bit of time to kind of temper that so that I could have a bit more of a balanced conversation with people and enjoy that. But I realized that being too much what you think other people want, actually you lose yourself and it doesn't feel authentic and you start hating it and it self-destructs. So instead, reflect on how you enjoy yourself most and lean into that. Perhaps you love geeking out on stuff, or perhaps you like having deep emotional conversations and serious questions, or perhaps you like joking around or getting philosophical. It might even vary depending on the situation. So think about what it looks like when you're with loved ones versus colleagues versus clients versus just working on your own, or even just relaxing on your own. Come up with some of those thoughts around what does that look like when you're enjoying yourself and at your best. Now, answering that hopefully is helpful, because I think often people say they want to find themselves, they want to understand who they want to be and who they are. But actually, I find it easier to answer how I want to be and how I am in moments with other people or on my own. Now, once you know the answer to that, perhaps the hardest thing is then to catch yourself, particularly in a anxious or self-destructive moment, and think, right, I'm a mental energy athlete. What do I need to do so that I show up as my best? Now, I found that it gets easier with practice, but for now, I'd recommend creating some kind of visual reminder. It doesn't have to be obvious for other people, like, be a mental energy athlete, although maybe we could get t-shirts printed. But instead, it could just be some abstract image or item. So, for example, an image on your lock screen on your phone that is a reminder for that would be sufficient. Mine is part of a vision board that I have on my iPad, and I have seen it regularly enough that it kind of has become a bit more ingrained. But even preparing for this podcast episode has got me thinking about other ways in which I can create reminders for myself. Now, if you sometimes find it hard to relax or exercise or look after yourself in other ways because it feels selfish, because spending time on yourself rather than looking after others can sometimes feel like that, and I've definitely felt like that. One way that makes this all easier is to focus on the benefit to others when you are at your best. When you are at your best, what does it mean for others? Do they have a more enjoyable interaction? Do they find it calming and less stressful, or that they have more fun? And I find that useful because it then makes me feel like, yeah, I owe it to my friends, my family, my clients, my team, my audience. I owe it to them to be at my best. And as a result, I find it much easier to take action to make that happen than if I felt like, oh, well, I'm improving my own mental energy just so I feel good. Now, I know some people are like, why wouldn't you? But for some of us, like, yeah, it's a really weird thing. It helps if you just think about what does it mean for other people. So hopefully that's clear that to show up at our best, we need to be clear about, firstly, what does being at our best mean? We need some kind of reminder that this is something that we want to do, not just for ourselves, but for others, and that we're doing this by essentially improving our mental energy and almost treating ourselves as a mental energy athlete who regularly takes actions and spots these things to improve it. So how do we do this? What does the training regime look like as a mental energy athlete? Well, I'll share some things that work for me, and actually include some tactical recommendations from experts out there. But ultimately, you'll need to work out what works for your body and mind. So I'm going to give you 10 tactical ways to improve your mental energy, and I'm going to share it via a mnemonic that I've created that just makes it easier for you to write them down and potentially remember. It's quite big with 10, but I think we can do it. So the mnemonic, the word is confidence, which works nicely because when your mental energy is high, you will feel more confident. And for a lot of people, showing up at their best is feeling and coming across as confident, which I think is nice. So let's start off with the first C of confident, which is calm, which is all about reducing your physical anxiety. Because sometimes I can get stuck in an emotional moment, right? Feeling anxious, worried, or overwhelmed to the point that I feel it physically and struggle to let it go. Now, in those moments, I use breathing. Specifically, breathing out for longer than I breathe in. There's a technique that you might be familiar with called box breathing, which you can Google and see. Essentially, it's you kind of breathe for a number of seconds, hold it, then breathe out for a number of seconds, hold it, and then breathe in for a number of seconds, and so on. And crucially, the out breath has to be longer than the in breath. I've seen some videos talking about how as you exhale, it actually reduces your heart rate. As you inhale, it increases your heart rate. Therefore, if you're trying to calm yourself down, then you want to be breathing out for longer than you're breathing in. And I found that really effective. I've found it effective for calming myself before I deliver a presentation or have an important meeting, or even just in the moment where I'm feeling emotional or stressed. So that's calm. Next, optimism. This is all about overcoming some of that negativity, that pessimism, that self-bullying, frankly. It's something that certainly when I learned about as a concept called positive psychology, which I also got from Paul Avens actually, which I found really useful to help me catch my inner bullies, those inner voices that basically say that I'm doing everything wrong or that I need to do something in a particular way that isn't frankly true, that I succumb to feeling like, oh, I need to be perfect, I need to do this absolutely perfect, or it's absolutely important that I do this on time and that I do everything that I've agreed to, and all these things, which whilst they can sound true to yourself, and particularly those are why you have those inner voices, the resulting impact can be to beat yourself up and make you very anxious. And so instead, positive psychology is all about catching yourself in that moment and then instead tapping into what it calls your sage, or sort of that inner voice that can give you encouragement and advice and kindness. And the best way to think about it is it's that same voice that you would give others. So if someone else came to you and shared that thing that you're currently feeling anxious with and all their beliefs around why that's completely appropriate to feel anxious with and why they have to do it in this particular way and whatever, what would you say to them? What encouragement or advice or kindness would you offer them to let them off the hook and feel better about themselves and not beat themselves up and find a better path? It's that voice that you would use for others so readily, making sure that you're using that for yourself. So that's all about catching those negative thoughts and focusing on talking to yourself in a much more positive way. Third one, to N, for nutrition. So most of us know what you are meant to eat. And so when planning or choosing a meal, I, in the past, have really struggled with trying to go for the healthy option. I tend to be like, but that looks so tasty and whatever. And in the past, I have had periods where I sort of logged every meal I had. I did it every day for 365 days as part of big fitness and weight loss thing. And I did get great results. But I often found that it was a slightly painful process that sometimes felt a bit negative and didn't allow me to enjoy things in the way that I wanted to, whether it was healthy or not. Now, when I'm choosing a meal, I try to think about what would be best for my mental energy. And often that actually results in me picking the healthier option, but for a reason that feels less self-chastising for being a fatty or whatever. Now, sometimes that does mean enjoying a tasty dessert in that moment where I'm trying to create this moment of enjoyment, and maybe I've got a lovely dessert wine there and this delicious brownie or whatever. But in general, it helps me avoid particularly the really crappy fast food and quantities of treats that I know that I'm going to regret just 5 minutes later. Next, fun. Do what you enjoy. For me, that might be dancing, being playful, being in nature, creating things, listening to comedy, playing games, particularly with my kids, but like find what it is that you find fun and do more of that. I think I've found in the past that when I've got so focused on what I'm trying to do for my career and what I'm doing for my family as a result and so on, I've found that I fell into this slip where I would chastise myself for having fun. It felt like, oh, well, what is the purpose of this? How is this going to contribute to my goals? And it would stop me enjoying things that I would normally enjoy. And so I would then go, well, I'll just stop this and then I'll go and work or do something like that. And instead, what I found is thinking about fun as part of, actually, this is an important part of my mental energy. This helps me be at my best when I'm then working. It's allowed me to let go and actually have fun in those moments and prioritize it and make time for it, which has been really cool. Next, interaction. Spending time with people, but particularly those people that you really connect with and that give you joy. That's something that's took me quite a long time to realize, is rather than going out there, particularly for work networking, going out there with the aim of, let me find the person could have the biggest impact on my business or whatever. When I used to do that, I would find that it felt inauthentic. I didn't enjoy it. I found it very sapping of energy. And often that partnership or whatever wouldn't come to anything because there isn't the resonance. Whereas later on, I kind of discovered, actually, you know what? At the time, it felt like caring less about it, but that's shifted now. I found that I just connect with people that I liked and have fun with. And then suddenly that led to much better interactions from a work perspective in terms of partnerships and clients and all these sorts of things. But actually just my personal mental energy massively improved. It means that often when I go to an event and spend time with people and party and do all that kind of stuff, I come away energized and with more energy than at the beginning than if I'd rested before. Now, partly that's because I'm extroverted, and people who are introverted will feel that differently. But certainly, I think whether you're an extrovert or introvert, making sure that you're spending time with the people that you really connect with and being aware of whether are you enjoying time with the people that you're spending time with? And as a result, changing how you're spending your time is a really powerful thing. And I think particularly during interactions with other people, be present. So making sure that you're not on your phone or whatever, but also being authentic and showing how you feel in that moment and being open and opening up, I've found has really helped to create deeper connections quickly with people and has been infinitely better for my mental energy and happiness and all that kind of stuff. Next one to D, discipline. Now, I've been talking about doing what you enjoy and spending time with people, so I probably need to talk about moderation on vices. Now, I love a variety of alcoholic drinks, particularly. I have a collection of single cask, single malt whiskies and another collection of interesting gins. I have a wine cellar of full flavoured wines, including sweet Vouvrays and Monbazillac and even some Tokai that I picked up in Budapest recently. We've got some fantastic Riojas and Malbecs and full flavoured fruit. I'm passionate about that, but also beer. I particularly love New England IPAs and the various hop combinations that create fruity, sweet, dank, piney, citrusy combinations and soft mouthfeels. And I geek out on this stuff a lot with friends and so on. But also it's not just that I'm geeky about those things and enjoy that, but I love the social interaction of that. I love having a glass of wine with my wife, or a whiskey with my brother or my dad, or beers at my favorite pub with friends, or even just dancing the night away with people that I've only just met at a conference over some gin and tonics and whiskey cocktails. However, I also know that whilst taking these things completely out of my life would be to remove something that I enjoy, I do need to enjoy these things in moderation, as they can affect my mental energy the following morning pretty badly. In fact, I was out recently with some friends, and one member of our group, went pretty hard on it. And talking over the next few days, it became clear that he basically felt he'd lost 2 days as a result of that night out, as a result of a combination of, we were out late, but also just a bit too much on the alcohol, right? And he then regretted that. And I've been there too myself in the past, too many times, where it's that last couple of drinks we go, oh, yeah, that was a bad decision. And it's an easy mistake when you're enjoying yourself. Like, that's something that I have hit multiple times. So I try and practice some of this discipline. I try to drink water between alcoholic drinks. I particularly avoid drinking just for the sake of it. I'm never drinking to get drunk or whatever. Instead, I enjoy small amounts of drinks that I love rather than large amounts of drinks that I'm indifferent to. So, for example, you will never see me downing pints of cheap lager. I'll be sipping on a half a pint or even a third of a pint of a carefully chosen IPA and respecting it, enjoying it like it's the finest brandy. And yeah, I'll still drink quite a bit, but I don't now tend to get to the point where I have that weekend clearing hangover. I'll occasionally have a sore head on a rare occasion or whatever, but not to that level. And that's just come about from putting in some of that discipline. Now, for you, it might not be alcohol. It might be something else, such as switching to decaf, or as a colleague of mine shared, she permits herself one caffeinated coffee, but only after a glass of water. Like, whatever works for you, use your discipline to moderate your vices with that intention of optimum mental energy. Again, I find it easier to apply that discipline, like around alcohol for me, when I'm thinking about, what does this mean for my mental energy tomorrow? How do I balance this? And how am I balancing this moment of enjoying myself with friends or new friends or whatever, versus the knock-on impact on my mental energy on the following day? Next, E, exercise. I find this is one of the biggest factors that affect my mental energy. Like, even going for a walk seems to make a big difference. My favorite forms are running, and particularly around a place that I've not been before. Often as part of business travel, which I find is really good, like from speaking at a conference or whatever, making sure that I go for a run in the local area, I really, really like. And in fact, with exercise more generally, I find that focusing on what it's doing for my mental energy makes it much easier to motivate myself than just being fit, which feels like a long-term thing that's harder to see in the moment, or looking good, which I want to look good, but equally I haven't got so much ego and vanity around it that I care that much. And so I find by focusing on the mental energy and what that means for others and so on, as talked about earlier, I'm more likely to do exercise more frequently for longer. So I found that really helpful. That mental energy athlete bit has actually improved my fitness, my health, and all those sorts of things. Not always consistently. Again, I have to get back into it. But yeah, it's definitely a lot better than it was ever since I started to think about the mental energy side. N, nighttime. Now, personally, I need at least 5 hours of sleep to function pretty much at all. I need 7 hours to be at my absolute best. And actually 6.5 will normally do it. My wife, on the other hand, needs 11 hours. So you need to work out what you need and take action to get it regularly. In my businesses, we actually wrote a training checklist for my team to use that when they're struggling with sleep, because it's quite a common thing that affects a lot of us, right? At various points in our life. And so we created this training checklist based on what's worked for others in the team. And I can share it with you if you'd like. Just email alexis.kingsbury@airmanual.co and I can send it over to you. But I found it really useful for myself and for the team to kind of go through what are the things that need to be in place so that I sleep well. because it's so important to do so. Next, celebration. Being grateful for what you have and appreciating yourself and others for what has been achieved and what has been done, and being content for those things that you have. I found it really useful particularly in the past, where I was really only just kind of learning this practice of gratitude, to do some journaling every morning, writing down what am I grateful for. And it was interesting that just asking that question and reflecting made me much more at peace. Talking about emotional, the vibration from earlier, like feeling at peace and content and having joy and love for everything that I have around me, rather than feeling like I desire some other thing. And I found that's been really useful for me over the years, to just be more grateful, and as a result show up at my best, because I'm just in a more positive, happy place. It's also nice and helpful to think about the people in your life that you're grateful for. And I've found that that's then really useful in helping me take action to show that appreciation, show that gratitude, or doing nice things for other people. I know some people struggle with this too, so I share it, is that I sometimes struggle to be thoughtful when I'm trying to be thoughtful, if that makes sense. So for example, if someone says, oh, it's this person's birthday on Wednesday, I go, oh my God, yeah, I need to get them a present. I want it to be a thoughtful present. Let me now come up with a thoughtful present. I find that mental exercise incredibly difficult. And I know a lot of people really struggle with buying presents for people. Whereas actually, perhaps it's a more helpful thing is to start with, what are you grateful to them for? And think about all that amazing stuff. And then I think thoughtfulness kind of comes out as a product of that, rather than the other way around. So there you go. Celebration, celebrating what you have, celebrating what other people have done, and showing that gratitude. And finally, we're on to the last E, which we're going to call elimination. This is all about beating overwhelm. Now, it was Dave Ramsey, who I had the pleasure of meeting only a few weeks ago, he said the key to beating overwhelm and anxiety is that you need a system. He said that when 6 things come at you, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and anxious and stressed. Instead, they need to be prioritized so that you can tackle each one a bite at a time. As he said, you can't boil the ocean. Don't let all the things surround you and overwhelm you and create that stress. Instead, have a system, a structure for how you prioritize and organize these things so that you can tackle each one in turn, and ultimately eliminate most of the things that don't matter, or even just by putting things in rank order and deciding, actually, that one's priority 4, 5, and 6. It's fine if you don't get to them because you've done priorities 1, 2, and 3. So there you go. That's the 10 tactics to give you better mental energy, more confidence, and help you show up at your best when it matters most. There's some other great resources that if you're interested in this area, if you're working on it, that I would highly recommend. So there's a book by Hal Elrod called Miracle Morning that's really awesome. Talks about a sort of morning routine that includes journaling and the gratitude stuff that I talked about. It was that book that led to me doing that for an extended period every morning. So I highly recommend that. I also recommend Jeff Sanders' 5 a.m. Miracle podcast. There's particularly, if you want to get a double benefit, look out for his interview with Hal Elrod, in which that they really dive into Miracle Morning and bring it to life in a really interesting way. Other people that are great to follow around sort of that mental energy and being your best self. One is Tony Robbins. Another is Brian Tracy. A lot of his great books, including things like Eat That Frog and various other ones around efficiency and time management, are really good. And then the last resource I want to recommend is a fantastic book called How Will You Measure Your Life? Now, it's written by the late Clayton M. Christensen, incredible guy and author. And arguably that book is perhaps the most important book I've ever read. Now, the big takeaway for me from that book is that life is not about how far you get in your career or how much money you make. It's about how purposeful your life feels, how you invest in your relationships, and how you stay true to your values. Clayton wrote about applying business principles to life, like how you allocate your resources, in this case, your time and energy. He makes it clear that if you're only focusing on short-term goals, whether it's in business or your personal life, you might be missing out on what really brings long-term fulfillment. Relationships, for example, are a huge part of that. You can't expect them to flourish if you're always trading family time for that next big project. Another key concept is staying true to your values. We all know it's important, but what he really emphasizes is the danger of those small compromises, the little decisions where you think, oh, it's just this one time. They can really add up. And over time, they can take you further away from the kind of life that you really want. Ultimately, being at your best is about thinking long term, not just in terms of success, but in terms of happiness and fulfillment. We're all in this for the long game. So let's make sure that we make the choices that are actually leading us to a life that feels meaningful, where we have the energy to be how we want to be. Thanks so much for listening. It's pretty scary sharing my weaknesses and frankly weird techniques that I've found have helped me, but I'm sharing it because I think it might help others too. So if you found this episode useful, please share it on social media, tag me in. I'd really, really appreciate it. And it's a great example of showing gratitude, which is and celebration, which is something we talked about earlier. But otherwise, until next time, have fun.